So as Hugh said, I met Hugh at the Green Gathering last year for all of about 10 minutes, and he seems to have become my #1 fan and sends me regular Facebook messages to tell me how great I am, which is very cheery. But yeah, so he asked me to come and speak about my my story and the non-profit organisation I started in 2012, the Seed Africa, which is based on the idea that when you educate a girl, you plant a seed to change a community, a nation, and every future generation. And it starts with one girl and one scholarship. And I'll tell you why. Apart from, as he said, I didn't really want to stand up here for half an hour and talk about me, because that's a bit cringeworthy. So rather I thought I would talk to you more about my takeaways from the experience that I've had over the last coming up for 3 years. And I don't have a book. The best thing I could think of to bring is some business cards, so if anybody wants a card at the end, they're very beautiful and have links to the website. And I also, should you, when I finish speaking, feel like you want to maybe make a donation to my project, I have these secret gifts. I won't say more than that. I think they're pretty cool. So any donation from £1, I'm very happy to give you a little secret gift. So today I wanted to talk to you about nurturing the global family. I feel like this is a topic that actually has been really beautifully introduced to some of the themes we've heard in today's poetry. It's very much inspired by my experiences in Africa. I was living in Swaziland for a year and a half from the beginning of 2013, but I actually first went to Swaziland 10 years ago in July, when I was a extremely naive 18-year-old. Finished my A-levels about 2 days before and said, see your parents, and jumped on a plane. I didn't really hear very much more about it. So since we're talking about nurturing the global family, I'd like to start by asking you, what is your definition of family? Maybe some people could...
Oh God, the people you have to spend Christmas with.
The people you have to spend Christmas with, yeah.
Anybody who I love and I'm fond of.
Everybody who you love and you're fond of.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Any more for any more?
That includes friends as well.
Yeah, which exactly.
Oh, it's the people that are in the pub in the great afterlife.
The people in the pub in the great afterlife. Great. Well, I believe the way you answer this question will very much depend on, your location and your experience, and inevitably much of what I've got to talk about today is based on my own humble experiences. But I believe over the last couple of decades we've really seen a breakdown of community, both locally and globally. To give a local example, how many people in this room know their neighbours?
Mostly here.
Well, actually, how many people outside this room know their neighbours? Because I think this is maybe not a good cross-section of society. We're probably all a lot friendlier than that. And to give a global example, in January 2,000 people were massacred in Nigeria and nobody blinked an eye. And actually the fact that nobody blinked an eye when this awful atrocity took place seemed to get more media attention than the atrocity itself. So whether you want to blame technology, the education of competition, or whatever it is, we are undoubtedly increasingly disconnected and inward-looking, and it's not doing us any favours. In Southern Africa, there's a philosophy of Ubuntu, which directly translates as the belief in a universal bond of sharing that connects all humanity. Or my preferred definition, I am because we are. In Swaziland, which for all intents and purposes is a single tribe state, this translates as a philosophy of the whole nation as one single family. So they use the same word for mum and dad, mage, babe, as they use for man or woman. So if I was to get on a bus in Swaziland and sit down next to somebody, I'd say, oh, Njani Bage. How are you, mum? whether or not I've ever seen this person before in my life. And as with much of Africa, when a child is born in Swaziland, it's not raised by 1 or 2 people, but by a whole village. It is everyone's child, to both love and discipline. And I really like this approach. I mean, how many of us now feel that Kit, who unfortunately has just left, is our godson? Like, I think all those words in your poem were really true. We really want, we do want all those things for him. And when I hear, I was living in a mud hut in a family homestead, and when I knew the cries of all the children, and when a child cried, I went to them and picked them up, because this is my child. This is my responsibility to soothe them as much as anybody else. And so during my time in Swaziland, I personally found that sense of connection very, very healing. So inevitably, the question that I've been asking myself since returning home last summer is how can we find that resonance and sense of unity in our own lives? So yes, travel is one accepted way. Exploring the world, no doubt, makes you feel more connected to the global family, but of course it requires time and money. And so I want to introduce the idea of crowdfunding, which some of you may have heard of and some of you may not. But basically, it sees multiple people uniting around a common cause and not giving up until it's successful. Which takes me on to my story. Sorry, I should explain crowdfunding a bit better. So generally with crowdfunding, it happens on a crowdfunding website. You need to raise a set amount of money for a specific goal. And unlike, if you do a marathon and you say, hey, I'm doing a marathon for this charity, whatever we can raise will be fantastic. I'd like to raise this much, but we'll see how we go. With crowdfunding, you say, okay, I need a specific amount of money, and unless I get that full amount, I can't achieve my goal. Whether it's, I want to set up a festival, so when people support you, they are not just saying, oh yeah, I'll give whatever I can. They're saying, no, I'll maybe come out of myself and become an ambassador for your brand and fight for you to achieve that goal. So you normally offer rewards. So, for example, my own crowdfunding campaign, if you put in £30, you got a T-shirt with our logo on it. And so people who would otherwise come and look at the campaign and maybe give £5, £10, they would go, oh, but I really like what this is about, and I kind of want to be an ambassador for this. I want to have a T-shirt. Okay, maybe I'll give £30 because I'm putting in more than I normally would, but I'm also getting something back. And crowdfunding is all or nothing. So if you don't hit that target, then all of the money gets given back and you don't receive a penny. And which is very, very scary when you launch a campaign. But the benefit of that is that people who do put money in will really fight for you to achieve your goal. Talk to their friends and family, encourage them to put money in too, use social media. So my story. As I said, I went to Swaziland when I was 18 to volunteer in a children's care centre. It was a centre set up for children who can't afford to go to school, because at that time there was no free primary or secondary education in Swaziland. And I was told I was to be responsible for the 5 to 8-year-olds. What that meant was we had a field, and I was given a mat, and it said, here's your 5 to 8-year-olds. Keep them safe until break time, and if you can teach them something, all the better. Well, of course, they all just ran off and played. But one child remained, an 8-year-old girl called Lelo. And she... Is this a story or is this real? It's real. And this child really wanted to learn. She wanted to sit with me all day. Any knowledge you could pass on to her, she just totally soaked up. And her appetite for learning was just really quite incredible. So when I left, the care centre, after a month, I said to her, okay, I'm going to find a way to send some money out to you and make sure you can go to school. So I sponsored her all the way through primary school. I went off and started university, so I obviously didn't have any money myself, but rather than going out, I'd use my student loan to send money to pay for her education. And she came top of her class every single year in primary school. And when she graduated primary school, she graduated with a merit, which is the highest grade you can achieve. So when I got my first graduate job, I could finally afford to go back and visit Lelo. 7 years since I last saw her, and I took her to interview for some of the best boarding schools in the country, with the hope that we were going to get into one that had a full bursary program for children from underprivileged backgrounds. She got into probably the second best boarding school in her country, which, given that she had been going through the government state system, was an incredible feat. But unfortunately, it was the school that didn't offer a bursary, or certainly not a full one. So now I had this situation. Here was this girl, this very bright, then 14-year-old girl from an incredibly vulnerable background, who had been offered this incredible opportunity and deserved to take it. But I mean, for anybody who has children in private school, it was way beyond my means as a 24-year-old graduate. And so I started my organisation, The Seed Africa, based on the idea that when you educate a girl, you plant a seed to change the world. Around that same time, someone introduced me to the Girl Effect, which brings together all the evidence that actually educating girls in the developing world is the most effective way of stopping the cycle of poverty dead in its tracks. When you educate a girl, they marry much later, they have fewer children, they have wisdom and they have choice, and those are two really lethal weapons. Educated girls reinvest 90% of their future income back into their families, compared to only 30 to 40% for men. They're much less vulnerable to sexual abuse and HIV, and crucially, educated girls educate their children. And so they, so that's how the cycle of poverty stops dead in its tracks. So, having understood this principle, and that educating Lelo was actually not about one girl, it was about her whole community. It was about the positive ripple effect that would begin if she could take up this opportunity and become a leader of tomorrow. I started the crowdfunding campaign for The Seed and shared this vision with others, with no idea what the response would be. And we were incredibly fortunate in the next sort of 4 to 5 weeks, raised £7,300 from about 140 people, 140 to 200 people. And as I say, about people becoming really getting behind the cause, the reason I differ on the numbers is about 140 people put money into the campaign online. But then, for example, somebody at the end of my road has a Christmas party every year, and they said, well, actually, Georgie, every year we have this Christmas party, and we always have a raffle, and actually this year we want the raffle to be for Lelo, and so they had sort of 40 guests who also put money in. We ran another campaign in January this year, and raised another £4,500, and in the last 2.5-3 years, in total we've raised more than £14,000 from between 250 and 300 people, which from the seed of an idea is quite astonishing. But as much as the seed is about empowering Lelo and the positive ripple effect that starts when you give her that opportunity, it was also for me about empowering individuals around the world. I think all do feel increasingly overwhelmed by all the problems in the world today. Every time we turn on the news, it seems particularly in the last few months, we're just becoming more and more depressed by all the suffering that's going on around the world. And no matter how many charity appeals you sign up to, how much do you really feel that you're making a difference? So the seed was about saying, okay, there are all of these problems in the world, and there are millions of girls out of school, but rather than trying to tackle the kind of the millions, let's just focus on one. Let's just start with one and really follow her through this path and see the benefit of that and the way it does influence her community and her country. And so all of those supporters, they've become such incredible ambassadors for Lelo, but also for the principle of girls' education and for the belief that individuals do have the ability to change the world. Every few months they get emails about Lelo's progress, hearing that now she's used a computer for the first time in her life, and then perhaps a few months later hearing that now she's getting more than 90% in IT. And seeing that, knowing that started with them. But it didn't just start with them, it started because they took hands with the person next to them and united around a common cause. You might be familiar with the principle of a flash mob, when people all get together perhaps in Grand Central Station on one day to do one dance together at one moment and surprise everyone around them and make everyone's day. Well, we consider the Seed supporters to be a philanthropic flash mob. So rather than all coming together and waving our jazz hands in motion at the same time, let's all come together and come with what you have. Whether it's time, money, our smallest donation to date has been, I think, £2, and the highest has been, highest single donation has been £500. And by coming with whatever you have at one time, all together, then we can do something incredible. I think the result of starting the Seed for me, but also I think for all of our supporters, has been a feeling of greater interconnectedness, confidence and resonance, as well as finding a source of light and a sense of hope in an often very dark and troubled world. There's an African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so as a global family, as we look to the future and our goals for a more sustainable, peaceful world, we must go together. And so what can you do to nurture the global family? Start by getting to know your neighbours. Have a street party. We had a street party in where my childhood home is a couple of weeks ago, and we went from sort of probably being a little bit suspicious of our neighbours to having this amazing sense of community, saying hi on the street. Actually, when I started the Seed, I emailed everybody in my street, and a great number of our supporters are people who live right next door. There's also an elderly gentleman who lives across the road from me, former head teacher, and his wife suffers from dementia, so he has a pretty tough time. And whenever I pop over there and spend half an hour sitting with him, I always leave feeling so wonderful, and it's so worth taking that time. The other thing you can do is look into crowdfunding and join campaigns that resonate with you. Even if you can't donate money, you can often donate time or skills instead. And when you think of starting a new project, or even just in your day-to-day life, I would encourage you to aspire to think global. Proceed with compassion, and remember your brothers and sisters around the world, and also those living right next door. Let compassion be your default position. In this world, no one is better than anyone else. We're one. If anybody is interested in finding out more about the Seed, I have cards with our website, and also some little secret gifts in return for donations. Thank you very much.
Georgina, thank you very, very much, and it's fascinating and inspiring.